Wide receiver ranks 10 through 6. 10 through 6 here because we're in that time of year. We got NFL draft coming our way. We have so much we're going to be breaking down from. This is the biggest position group and the best position group on the draft slate, Scotty. We have wide receivers are stacked. This is it. So we're going to go through. We break these down. We're going to be giving you the top 10 wide receivers and a little bit of information on them, on why we think that they should be drafted and why they're going to be top picks and potentially big time additions to any roster that takes them in the draft. So let's go ahead. We'll start out with number 10. Hit that draft cue.
I can't even think of what it sounds like, Chris. I know what it sounds like, but I don't know what it sounds like.
Chairman, you're going to help me get that figured out. Number 10, Jalen Polk, wide receiver out of Washington, 6'1", 203 pounds, 22 years of age. You have the comp here, Scotty, to Romeo Doubs. Now, he obviously part of a team that made it pretty far through the season, finished with almost 1,200 yards, almost 16.8 yards per reception, 9 touchdowns on 69 receptions. Super instinctual, refined, smooth footwork. He's got pretty good hands overall, but he's a playmaker. Scotty, why do you love Jalen Polk here at number 10?
Yeah, Jalen Polk would be my target for KC in like the second round if he's available. If we don't go wide receiver in the first round, I would love Jalen Polk. Transfer, started at Texas Tech, transferred to Washington. Washington's going to have 3 wideouts go in the top 4 rounds of this draft, likely, if not top 3. With Polk, everyone knows Rome Odunze, who will be on this list later, and Jalen McMillan's another guy that won't be on this list, but pretty damn solid and will be drafted as well. Jalen Polk, kind of just a jack of all trades, like didn't have a ton of route tree at Washington or Texas Tech like that, but shows the ability that he can do it. He's very good at that, like a stutter mid route guy. His hands, his playmaking, his catch radius is good. His yak is pretty solid, maybe not spectacular. He's like very, very solid in a lot of things. Maybe not the best athlete or the most spectacular player in this one, but Jalen Polk's gonna be a dude, and I've heard he's rising the draft boards. Like I always thought he was gonna be a late second rounder, but he might be as high as very early second round.
Yeah, I mean his catch radius was what has been catching a lot of people's attention. Like he's consistently, crazy. He got the catch radius, man.
Catching attention. I thought you were purposely doing that. Were you not?
Well, he was catching attention too, but his catch radius was catching attention. But yeah, I mean, he's able to pick the ball, snag the ball off the turf, go up and reach for it, bring it down. He can reach, left to right, just make big plays, and he's able to make those catches in difficult situations. So that's another aspect of what a lot of people are saying could potentially add him to a top spot on one of these rosters, but. Doesn't have a ton of high-end speed, but his upside is probably going to be in his catching ability more so than anything else. And still, he's going to be a solid, number 2 receiver for a team that can take him, and depending on, obviously, the wide receiver core that ends up drafting him, but probably a number 2 receiver for his most likely landing spot. So there you go. Jalen Polk, number 10. All right, next up. By the way, he went to the same high school as Des Bryant. Fun fact.
Oh.
All right, next up, number 9. Keon Coleman, wide receiver, Florida State, coming in here at number 9. Keon Coleman is souped up. He's a big receiver, man. He's got some size.
Plays even bigger than his size, I feel like.
Which is crazy. 6'3", 213 pounds, 20 years old. You got him comped to Allen Robinson. Only had on his 12 games played, 658 yards, 11 touchdowns on 50 receptions, but pretty instinctual playmaker, pretty good on the hands. He's very sure-handed. And he's got that pro-ready frame, which is kind of what his calling card is. He could come in and be physical and be that big wide receiver target that a lot of teams are looking for. He's explosive. He's got that vertical threat. But, Scotty, what else do you like about Keon Coleman here at number 9?
I mean, Keon, first of all, you got a 20-year-old, so he's young. You're projecting a little because he didn't put up huge stats in any season at Florida State. But you see the athletic traits. This dude is a freak athlete, like potentially the best. Yeah, you could argue, if someone wanted to argue he's the best athlete at the wide receiver spot in this draft, I wouldn't argue too hard against that. Like, dude's an athletic freak. He's got leaping ability, he's got size, he's got speed. My concern here, and why I'm probably lower on him than maybe most, is there wasn't a lot of separation, and which is why he wasn't targeted a ton or getting a lot of catches. His route running he's very, very underdeveloped as a route runner. Long way to go there. And maybe if he can develop that along with, now I'm not saying he's going to be like, what's the boy for Seattle, but like, if he can put it together, he's kind of, he's not as big as,
DK.
I'm drawing like DK, but like he can be a similar threat as DK if he puts it together. But there just wasn't always the separation that I want to see. He's more of just like a back shoulder threat or a deep ball threat that you throw to him in coverage, believing he's going to come down with the ball.
Yeah, that's the biggest the biggest thing. But also too, one thing that he did in college that not a lot of people recognize is the fact that he did punt returns. He was doing some punt returns. You don't see too many 6'3", 210, 213 pound players taking punts, but hey, he averaged 12 yards per return on 25 punts. By the way, he won't turn 21 until after the draft, but I guess my concern, the only thing that I would critique here is whether or not, that separation, if he's able to start getting some of that, because obviously size matters, but at the same time, you can't separate. I mean, what I don't know. We'll see. But either way, solid prospect coming in here at number 9. That's what she said. Yep. There you go. Getting spicy.
It's spicy.
Does he remind you of T. Higgins? Says Dr. J.
I could see a little bit of that. Yeah, he's a little bulkier than T. Higgins. Is a little longer, whereas Keon Coleman's a little bulkier, and Keon Coleman's probably actually a better athlete than T. Higgins, but T. Higgins probably is better at making a play on the ball and has better hands. So, but yeah, I could see that a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so there we go. There is number 9. All right, here we go. Number 8 on our draft board. Well, rankings, I should say. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas. 5'11", 165 pounds, 20 years of age, and Deshaun Jackson is the comp here for Xavier Worthy. So, Xavier Worthy coming in. We talked about big on the last prospect. Now we got that speed, Scotty. We got that speed. 5'11", 165, smaller guy. And he's just a burner down the field. He had just over 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns on 75 receptions. Slim, wiry, plays game-breaking speed. He could score from anywhere, basically. So we're looking at guy who could separate, and he could just make big plays, the home run plays, more so than anybody else. But Scotty, thoughts on Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, Keep Close says he's mid, but a nice kid. I'm not as high necessarily on him as some. And everyone, like, there's so many people that thinking KC would be a great fit for him, and I'd prefer him not to land in Kansas City. But it's hard to call a guy mid that broke the NFL Combine record in the 40. There's not a lot of mid to that. That's the fastest guy that's ever participated in the Combine at 4.21 40. Obviously not a big guy, 5'11", 165, very slight of the frame. There's some issues with being that slight frame and whether he can hold up to hits, but he doesn't necessarily have a huge injury history in college, so maybe he'll be fine. Part of me is just like, Chris, I feel like he's either a guy you do a wide receiver screen to, or like an end around or something around, a gimmick play around the line of scrimmage, or you throw to him deep. He's not a guy I see as contributing intermediate like whatsoever. So I don't, and listen, KC, I've seen them try and take gadget, just fast players like a McCole Hardman, or I'm drawing a blank on some of the other ones. Even Kadarius Toney, who's not necessarily fast, shifty. Obviously, Tyreek was different, and that worked out great. But like, there's only one Tyreek, so I think Xavier Worthy's going to be a dynamic guy. And with the ball in his hands, he's going to be insane. But you got to get it in his hands. And I want a guy that kind of maybe does a little bit more in the intermediate part of the field as well, where I just don't know if he's going to be that guy for you.
Yeah, physicality is going to be the biggest thing. Like when it comes to bigger, I mean, just guys that are going to get physical with him. Whether it's you got to be able to beat him with your speed, and we'll see what ends up happening. But Xavier Worthy coming in.
You're talking about how like his speed, breaking the record says like there's no mid about it. Like how did the last guy that broke the combine record do?
Fair.
Tyler Nock PM kicking in. Good night, everyone. Good night, Riley. Have a great night.
Good night, Riley.
Thank you for being here.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but I've been I'm having like a back spasm as we're on stream here, but I'm toughing through it, guys.
Hey,
I'm tough. I'm built like that.
You're tougher. You're tougher than some athletes with back spasms.
My back is struggling right now.
All right,
we need to get a new chair or something.
Let's get to number 7 here. Let's cue the music.
Nope. That's
the number 7. Number 7 on our top wide receivers on the draft board, we have Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon, 6'2", 176 pounds, 21 years old, and we have a player comp to Will Fuller. Now, here we go. Troy, silky smooth playmaker. Kind of that's what he's classified as here. 1,300, almost 1,400 yards, almost 17.1 yards per reception, 14 touchdowns on 81 receptions. He has that short area quickness. He's very tall with a very slim frame, but he has some speed to him. So you have that to go with everything else. Scotty, why do you love him here at number 7?
Well, because he's a duck, Chris. No, Troy Franklin, not that dissimilar to Xavier Worthy in the sense that he's first and foremost probably going to be seen as a deep threat. That was Will Fuller's traits, and what he was the best at. And Troy Franklin showcased that for sure. At Oregon, being a deep threat on that roster. He can do more than just that. He can do the short to intermediate, in my opinion, and a pretty good route runner. My biggest issue, well, there's a couple. My biggest issue is one, he's 6'2", 176. So he's
skinny mini.
11 pounds. He's 11 pounds heavier than Xavier Worthy, but 3 inches taller than Xavier Worthy. So, he's got that slight frame as well. And he's just not it doesn't look natural when he catches the football. It's just like, it's not like he had a ton of drops or had a huge issue with that, but like it looks almost like odd, like he's having to like put in more effort than it coming naturally as a catcher of the football. So he's not necessarily a guy that like is gonna make beat you on in tight coverage and go up and grab the ball. And frankly, I worry about him and with physical corners that might be able to press him at the line with his size. slender frame, but if he gets past the press and gets downfield, like, dude's a legit deep threat. 21 years old, still pretty young. I like him a lot. I like his game a lot. I probably dropped after watching more and looking at some of these other guys. He's probably lower than he probably would have been a couple months back for me in my rankings, but still number 7. Listen, Chris, there could be easily seven wide receivers taken in the first round of this draft. This is by far the best position in this draft is at wideout, and it's deep and it's very impressive. Like, I could see there's like 10 guys that I could see easily going in the first round. I don't think 10 wide receivers are going in the first round, but I think right now the over-under on DraftKings is 6.5 for wide receivers.
Take that over. Take that over if you have.
I would take the over, and I think it's plus on the over. I think it's plus money.
Value. Maybe I'd make a bet on
plus 140.
I'm gonna make that bet when we get done with number 6 here, because we're back from halftime. So let's get to number 6 here. Number 6 on our board, we have Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas, 6'2", 205, 21 years old. Got him compared to one of Rex boys that he's familiar with, George Pickens. Little Pickens. Scotty, he's coming in here at number 6.
Yeah, he's a physical player, very good at the catch point, very natural. Unlike Troy Franklin, looks very athletic and very good at coming up and making big plays. He had a phenomenal game this year against Alabama. He had a nice touchdown late in the semifinal against Washington. He was a transfer from Georgia, so he actually won a couple of natties, Chris. But he did transfer from Georgia to Texas. He was, Big 12 newcomer of the year this year. Second team All Big 12. There's a lot to like about it, and this guy would be probably of realistic guys for the Kansas City at the end of the first round. He'd be my second favorite choice. Obviously there's guys I'd take over him more than just 2 or 1 other, but realistic at the end of the round. He's more of he doesn't have a ton of like route tree stuff. Not a huge yak guy. Won't do that, but like throw it up to him. He's a little bit like Keon Coleman in that sense. But probably was a little more productive in college than Keon Coleman was. So I like his traits quite a bit, and I'm pretty high on this guy.
He wasn't super productive overall. 845 yards in 2023, 15.4 yards per reception, 11 touchdowns. But
11 tutties,
but
catches touchdowns.
You know what's interesting about him? That X factor, that dog in him. He wants the ball when it really matters. Think about this. He had the biggest moments. He wants the ball. He caught a 40-yard go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter of the college football playoff against Alabama 2 years ago. Last year, he caught game-clinching touchdown against Ohio State in the CFP semifinal. And in January, he caught a fade pass in the end zone for a score, putting Texas within striking distance of the Washington Huskies midway through the fourth quarter of that college football playoff semifinal game. So he wants the ball. He's been producing when it matters in those big-time games and big-time plays. So you got to like that when it comes to what he can do in clutch situations. It's pronounced Adonai. Adonai?
Adonai?
Nye? Adonai. We can't even get Adonai.
Bill Nye. It's Bill Nye the Science
Bill
guy.
Nye.
I like him less though.
Where's
science ain't real.
Where's Cuban when you need him? Adonai. Next up on our draft board of top 5 ranked players, we have Lad McConkey of Georgia, wide receiver, 6 foot, 186 pounds, 22 years old. You have a player comp to Deontay Johnson, Scotty. Now, McConkey, you've been high on him. He's a guy that you've been kind of hoping
him.
drops to the Kansas City Chiefs by the end of that first round. But 478 yards in 2023, not 2 touchdowns. So not a ton of production in this past year, but he's got a lot to love. He's got technique. He's got sure hands. He's smooth with his routes. He is a very good pass catcher. Nice acceleration off the line. Lots of like. Scotty, why would you love him on your team out of this draft?
Because he's elite at what I think is the most important thing to do, and that's getting open, Chris. He's the best technician of any wide receiver in this draft. Best route runner, best footwork, best hand-eye. Like, everything is so married in his routes. He's tied together. He's able to get free releases. Everything. Listen, he's a good athlete, better than probably people project. He's not overly tall. He's a 6 foot, so he's not a huge guy, but he's not tiny either. 186, so he's thick enough, built. He's maybe not like necessarily going to be a deep threat ever at any point in his career, and he's probably not a guy you're looking at that's going to be elite at yards after catch. Those are probably the 2 biggest weaknesses on tape, is like deep threat down the field and yak. But the dude against elite competition continually is able to get open, maybe better than anyone in this draft. I like guys that can get open, Chris, and Lab McConkey does that better than anybody in this draft. So he's straight out of Georgia. I just saw on the screen here. So I thought he went to Georgia, but he went to Georgia. No big deal.
Yeah,
Good job, Chris.
Yeah, Georgia. It's you've never heard of Georgia University?
Also, you put 2 D's at the end of his name.
Is it?
It does have 2 D's.
I was gonna say, I was like, does it? I'm pretty sure it does. But yeah, no, Georgia. It's the spot to be. Yeah, the only reason why he didn't have a ton of production was mainly because he was dealing with injuries a ton. So that maybe that's something you keep an eye on too, is, you know, lack of size, physicality, and stuff when injuries could be in the mix. But outside of that, there's a lot to love about everything that he brings. I mean, separation is what that's the key, right? That's the biggest thing. So
I want him to be in a red helmet like he is in this picture so bad, Chris. I'd be so pumped if Lab McConkey's the
A
pick
monkey's
with
paw
Chiefs
curls.
being
He
the
goes to
first.
San Francisco.
They have a gold helmet, sir.
true.
It depends.
True.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
All right, let's go to our number 4 draft prospect on our wide receiver rankings. And at number 4, we have Brian Thomas Jr., who is LSU's big boy in the wide receiver core. 6'4", 205 pounds, 21 years old. You have him comped out to Christian Watson. 1,177 yards, 17.3 yards per reception on 17 touchdowns and 68 receptions, Scotty. Go ahead. Let's talk about Brian Thomas Jr.
He's tall. I mean, he's tall and lengthy, Chris. That jumps out on tape. But he's twitched up for his size, Chris. Like, you don't... A lot of times, like, those long, lanky guys are kind of, like, awkward, but he is flexible. He's able to run multiple routes. He can get deep. He's long. He's got, you know... He can make tough catches. Now, he makes some, you know, drops at times that maybe probably shouldn't happen, but the dude's an elite project. Like, you watch him on tape and you're like, oh, if he puts everything together, like, he's going to be a monster in the league. Put up some pretty damn solid stats this year at LSU. Obviously, LSU threw it around a little bit this past year. But he's a monster. He's, you know, there's another LSU wide receiver still to come on this list too. So Very different style of wide receivers in these two LSU guys, but Brian Thomas Jr. will go in the first round. He will be super interesting to watch because if he develops and he bulks up a little bit, like, look out, he's gonna be tough.
Yeah, not one of the more like polished route runners by any means, but still, once he gets the ball, he's good yards after the catch. He's able to accelerate, juke. He's able to make some things happen after he catches, which is, something you always try to look for as well. So, yeah, making big plays downfield after the catch once he gets there, something you'll probably see a ton of in the NFL. But yeah, solid pick for anyone who is able to get their hands on Brian Thomas. Again, not the only LSU player on our board. Let's get to number 3 on our list. We have, another LSU player, Malik Neighbors, coming in here at number 3, 6 foot, 200 pounds, 20 years old. You have him comped out to Torrey Holt. In your notes, you had Torrey Holy, and I assumed Torrey Holt was who you were going for
no,
there.
I meant that was pre-laptop, so I was typing on my phone.
Yeah. So
he's holy, and he's gonna become a quarterback's best friend.
Yeah,
and dare I say, their neighbor.
Some people, I mean, won't you be my neighbor? Malik will. He is number 2 in a lot of people's draft boards. Got him at
there's a decent amount that have him at 1, Chris.
Yeah, so we have him a little lower here, because weirdly enough, compared to what a lot of people have, based off of the fact that he's athletic, he's fast, he has a ton of upside, he's got that dog in him. He's put up 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns in his last year here at LSU. He just has a lot of the attributes you look for.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guy's very natural, very instinctive, very good at tracking the ball on deep balls. Like, he will correct and find the path, and very good at the innate ability to get in the right spot. There's not a ton of weaknesses here. Listen, I like Neighbors a lot, and it's almost style, for what teams prefer at this point with these top 3. All 3, I think, are going top 10. Neighbors very well could be the first wide receiver taken. A lot of people are hyping him at that. He is the smallest of the 3 at 6 foot. And he's not like a physically dominant guy, which a lot of times when you're taking a wide receiver in the top 10 overall in a draft, you want just like a physically dominating presence. He's not necessarily that. Neither was Torrey Holt, and he had a pretty damn good career. So I love Neighbors. I think he's going to be really, really good. That just speaks to how good like a lot of years, he would be number 1 on my list for wide receivers. It's just how good this draft is. And the 2 guys ahead of him, I like a lot too. And it's picking, I mean, all 3 of these guys are very close, very close.
Splitting hairs.
Yes. I was going to say picking hairs, and I was like, that's not right.
Picking hairs.
I don't know who picks hairs.
I mean, some people do, maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
It's a thing. No, it's not. All right, number 2 on our list. We got Washington receiver Roma Odunze. Washington wide receiver, 6'3", 212 pounds, 21 years old. You got T.O. T.O. as the comp on number 2 receiver from Washington. Now, 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, 92 receptions. Super instinctual when it comes to playmaking. And he's big. He's got that pro-ready frame, so he's going to be able to hold up in the NFL. Nice hands, nice footwork. Got a little bit of everything here. That's why he's in number 2. Split hairs between 1, 2, and 3, but but depending on who you are and who you kind of value at this point. But hyper productive catcher, and a lot of people are super, super high on him.
Yeah. Obviously at 6'3", one of the bigger guys here, 212. So he's not necessarily lanky. He's built. He's a true alpha, Chris. people, even with how good that wide receiver core was for Washington with Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan, like Rome Odunze was the guy. He was the alpha. He was the wide receiver teams were trying to stop. And as you said, he had 1,600 yards. So they weren't that successful. His route tree is progressed. He can pretty much run every route with polish and nuance. Great hands, great ability to track the ball. Every part of that is elite in my opinion. Maybe the only knock on him is he's not probably going to be a huge yak guy. Not a guy once the ball's in his hands, he's just going to make three guys miss and turn something into a huge play. But like, he's gonna be so productive in this league, and if he gets in the right spot, we could see. I'm not gonna say a career like T.O.'s because that's lofty, but he's that type. He's that alpha, and he can dominate in this league just like he did at Washington.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why Washington was as good as they are, and he was a big part of it. So here he is coming in here, number 2 receiver on our 2024 NFL wide receiver draft rankings. Finally, I don't think this is a big surprise in a lot of circles, but we have our number 1 wide receiver coming in on our rankings, and it is Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State, 6'4", 205 pounds, 21 years old. You haven't come to one of my favorite receivers that I used to watch all the time back in the day, and that is Andre Johnson. Elite athlete, great hands, very, very good just with his technique. I mean, across the board, he is an ideal wide receiver for stepping in and making an impact right away. 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 67 receptions last year, Scotty.
Yeah, and if you go back 2 years ago when C.J. Stroud was the quarterback at Ohio State, I mean, that combination was the filthiest combo I've seen in a long time. And Marvin Harrison was the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in a long time. Now, didn't quite put up those same numbers this year, but still look good. It kind of had some small injury stuff that, like, I think held him back a little bit. Not a lot of weaknesses here, Chris. I don't think there's necessarily a lot of weakness. He can certainly continue to improve, but this dude's gonna be a Pro Bowl wide receiver in the league for a long time. So I don't know how much we have to say about him. He's transcendent. He's going to be wildly successful in the league, and I'm ready to see him and where he goes. I think the whole talk of him not being the number 1 wide receiver potentially is just similar to people getting bored, Chris. They get bored and they're like, let's make controversy or this or that. But I've heard there's legitimately teams out there that have Neighbors as 1. I haven't really heard of a Odunze at 1 for any team, but so we'll see what happens on draft night. But if I were drafting a wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. would be the guy.
I mean, he seems to be the sure thing. So usually, you have wide receivers, you have quarterbacks that are going to be the big hit in the first round of this NFL draft this year. I mean, it's going to be dominated by, wide receivers and quarterbacks win games. That's the recipe. So there's gonna be a lot of focus. I mean, you could see what you got between quarterbacks and wide receivers. How many?
That could very well be at least a third of the first round right there,
which is wild, which is crazy. And obviously there's some other pass guys. We're gonna get into tight ends. We're gonna get into some of the other positions as we continue on with our rankings. But it's great to get. Now we already have our quarterbacks. I'm going to get that VOD uploaded next in the next couple days. So make sure you tune into that. And then we have our wide receiver ranking. So let's recap